Our next slide that we're going to talk about is sales and marketing slide. It's actually one of my favorite because at the end of the day, no matter what idea you've got, you got to sell it. Okay, so on your sales and marketing slide, I'm going to tell you the do's and don'ts to protect you actually. So one of the things is that on your sales and marketing slide, okay, of course you want to talk about the ability to market and sell. Okay, one of the things you want to prove to the investor is that you have the ability. Someone on your team has a sales Rolodex that's going to help you launch into the marketplace, and somebody on your team has been successful of incorporating, launching, all the marketing campaigns out there. And so, for instance, if you're doing a business-to-consumer startup, I would hope and pray that you have somebody on your team that has experience selling to consumers, and they don't come from the business-to-business side. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of principles that are the same, but there are also nuances between B2C and B2B. So you want to make sure that people fully understand, especially the investors, who's on the team has the expertise in selling and also in marketing. And one of the other things you want to do is, and I went a little backwards, is you want to show your target market, okay? So, and this is going to vary to some extent depending on the cycle of your market. So if the life cycle, okay, of the market you're attacking is before the critical threshold point, what I call, okay, then you're going to be targeting innovators here and early adopters, okay? Obviously first the innovators and then the adopters. So how you approach those people from a marketing perspective is different than how you're going to approach people as you go into the marketplace, hitting the early mainstream, and it's going to vary, of course, your marketing strategies and sales tactics, okay? The other thing I want to see is distribution, partners, and I kind of talked about that a little bit on the previous slide of strategic partners and the type of channels, okay, you're going to target, okay? And because I understand retail really well, I'm going to look for also possible channel conflict, okay? So we definitely don't want to create channel conflict. And if you're going into retail channels, I will say this, if you have a business to consumer product and you're going into retail channels, as an investor and also as someone that has moved a lot of product to retail channels, I want to know that somebody on your team actually knows retail, how to sell to retailers, which means they'll have to also know the different distribution players, because a lot of the retailers will order from distributors. So that's also critical. One thing I don't encourage you to do is put your marketing campaign on the slide. You have to treat your marketing campaign like a very secret software code, as an example, or some of the things I talked about previously, and we'll continue to talk about, is the nuances of your business model. So keep that secret, because I can tell you from my personal experience, when I was younger, I went to see one of the VCs, and the guy grilled me. It was in a sector, a large sector, but he grilled me about all the sales and marketing ideas and strategies and all that. And later on, and nothing happened. It's like I went to a meeting. It was a long meeting, like an hour and a half for a VC. That's pretty good. And so I'm thinking I'm going to the next stage, when in reality nothing happened after that. And then later on I found out that that particular VC funded a competitor in the same space. Now, I will tell you, most VCs do not do that, okay? But you have to assume that even if it's not a VC, that somebody might send out your presentation to someone else for an opinion, because VCs or any type of investors will always ask people around them for second opinions. So you have to be very careful what you say in regards to sales and marketing. And I think the most beautiful picture to show is actually the sales funnel, okay? So the sales pipeline, okay? And so if you do have a sales pipeline, okay, then you kind of want to explain to the investor where you're at with that. And I would be very careful not to over-promise and under-deliver in the case of a sales pipeline. I can tell you that I've funded some startups before where they would have these huge enterprise customers, in their sales pipeline, and they were all excited about it and how everything was going great, and then 6 months later they're still trying to implement or even get the contract closed to deploy the technology at the enterprise level, and it's like every month the big fish is coming around the corner. It doesn't happen. So be very careful what you put in your sales pipeline. And what I would do is, I can tell you some of the entrepreneurs that I funded that were really smart, in their sales pipeline, they actually would put the probability of it closing within a specified period of time. And which tells me that there's one great entrepreneur, I'm not going to name him here, but unbelievable when it came to sales pipeline. I mean, this guy would list all the Fortune 1000 companies that they had in their sales pipeline. There was actually like 30 or 40 of them. That's why I funded him for millions of dollars. But he wrote down the probability and estimation when the sales would happen, and also what the potential range of the revenue was first year and also the subsequent years. So that was really cool. So you do want to have the sales pipeline in there, but like I said, be very careful in regards to how you do it. Also make it visual, okay? Your sales pipeline, I mean, there's different ways to do it. Obviously, you could have a visual, quick visual like that, and you could have, you could divide it into these components, okay? So you've got X amount of coming in, and then you've got X amount being narrowed down, going down the funnel, sales funnel, and then obviously you've got X amount down here to the close. And one of the other things you may want to have in here is how many customers you have, but be very careful. I'm not a big believer in putting all your internal data on the presentation. I've seen that a lot. I'm like, I would never do that. And so, I'm one of those people that if you send me a presentation, I'm never going to forward it to anybody. But bottom line is, there's people that will. So you have to be very careful about what you put in the sales and marketing program. Now, if you have some cool marketing materials that you already have out there that anybody can see, then I would put it in there. So if you're already out there with the product, let's say you're in retail or you have a cool retail package and you want to show it, by all means, put it in there. Make this sales and marketing exciting. In fact, one of the objectives of the sales and marketing slide is for the person, just like I was talking about, for instance, in relation to the competitive overview, where you explain to the investor where you fit in, how you're different, okay, than anybody else, versus direct competition and indirect competition, okay. In the marketing overview, the objective is to get the investor excited that there's a big market and you're going to ride this market and everything's going to be great, okay, and you're just chomping at the bits to do it. You just need a couple $1 million. The sales and marketing slide, you want to make it exciting in such a way, visually appealing, where they know, wow, this person knows how to market their product, and they have a very exciting sales pipeline. And one of the things I was going to tell you is that you can spin the sales pipeline a couple ways. For instance, if you are if you're doing a freemium model, and what I mean by a freemium model, for everybody, most people know it, is like if you're offering the product for free initially, and you're going to attach a different subscription prices and all that later, what you can do is, for instance, show the process of the growth. You could have a curve, okay, so it's a freemium curve. Actually, that's a very bad drawing right there. You could have a graph, okay, and you're showing the growth, okay, of your freemium customers. Okay, so you're like right there. And I think also it's cool if you're doing a freemium model where you're offering your product or service for free to get the market traction and momentum. It would be kind of cool to have some numbers. I've actually studied the growth of Instagram. I found it very fascinating. And one of the things that you see in Instagram is, like, if you look at their numbers, they show like It's growing slowly and it's growing up and it's going crazy, okay? So, anything that shows that from a sales and marketing perspective that you're gaining momentum, that you know how to market the products, that you have the tools to take it out into the marketplace, all those elements make the sales and marketing plan very exciting.